This is a very special episode as we got the opportunity to interview Glenn Sanford, the founder and CEO of eXp Realty. eXp Realty was created 15 years ago and has already grown to be the third largest in the world, representing over 87,000 agents in 24 countries. In 2022, eXp was the #1 brokerage in the world based on transaction count. In that same year, eXp saw revenues of $4.6 billion, which was a 22% increase from the previous year. A truly remarkable achievement by any standard, and you can tell by Glenn's energy in this interview that he is just getting started. eXp is the world's first digital brokerage, and this revolutionary model has removed the brick and mortar offices and the franchise layers that come with so many expenses, and in turn, takes this revenue and shares it with its agents. This model works so well that in 2022, eXp gave back to its agents a sum of $240 million US through its revenue share program and its equity benefits through stock. This makes every agent at eXp an owner and creates a financial alignment between the agents that ultimately wants them to see each other succeed, and a culture of success and growth and collaboration. In this episode, Glenn shares some of the most recent exciting developments at the company, as well as some insights into what we can expect next for both the agents as well as the consumers who are buying and selling homes. He then gets into the trends that he's witnessing within the landscape and touches on some of the competition that's emerging, as well as a discussion about, hey, is there actually going to be digital-only brokerages in the future, or will there remain space for the brick and mortar traditional model to continue? This was a really eye-opening and inspiring conversation with someone who has truly altered the course of real estate on a global level. For those interested in learning more about this life-changing brokerage, please feel free to reach out using any of the contact information below. And now, let's get into our conversation with Glenn Sanford, founder and CEO of eXp Realty. So, welcome. Today, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Glenn Sanford, creator of eXp, speaking with us today. And we want to be very courteous of the time that you are giving us today. So thank you so much. And let's just dive right into it. And first question we have for you right off the top is, eXp has exploded globally here, and you guys are now operating in 24 countries around the world. So you must get incredible insights and data when it comes down to the home buyer and seller behaviors. Can you share some of the biggest trends that you've noticed in consumer behavior recently?
Hey, Dan. Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. What we're noticing, obviously, we've in the U.S. and I think up into Canada as well. I mean, interest rates have went up dramatically. Home buyers have slowed down their purchases. Home sellers are having to actually do price reductions to actually get homes to move. And of course the market goes in cycles. So every 10 or so years or so, there's some cycle or some shock to the system. And so this one's a little bit more systemic in that it's driven by the U.S. Fed and other banking institutions around the world that are basically raising interest rates to tame inflation. And of course, houses and house pricing is in there as well. So what we are seeing is fewer buyers in the marketplace, and the ones that are in the marketplace are spending more time doing more research because they can. So they're looking at more properties before they pull the trigger. And then home sellers are, I think, a lot of them are opportunistically selling in the the last 12 to 18 months because of high prices. Now the sellers that are that need to sell are having to now deal with the fact that they're going to need to probably price reduce in order to get competitive enough for buyers to say, hey, that's a good deal, that's worth my time, and to actually pursue purchasing that property. So that's kind of the dynamics that we're seeing. Now, it's to some extent it lags in other parts of the world. So in Europe, in Australia, in some of these other markets, they're not seeing that happening as quickly. But here, domestically, we're certainly seeing those slowdowns take place.
Spoken like a true realtor. We could tell that you used to be had boots on the ground like the rest of us here. And yeah, fascinating to kind of be able to see the shifts happening on literally a global perspective. So a quick follow-up question then. How is eXp then utilizing that kind of same data to help the agents and ultimately create a better experience for their clients?
One of the cool things about eXp, and this, it might sound like I'm tooting my own horn, maybe at some level we are, but we have the lowest cost to operate real estate brokerage platform in the marketplace. And so for those of you who aren't aware, eXp has the minimum physical bricks and mortar footprint that's required by the various regulatory bodies in the various markets that we compete in. In some cases, we don't actually have to have any physical offices. In other markets, we have to have an office with a door, and the auditors need to come in and do all the stuff. So it's just, each market's a little different, but we operate with the smallest bricks and mortar footprint. And why that's important is when the market slows down, the way we reduce costs is we need fewer transaction level support people, which we did some of that trimming back last year, but we can still invest in the products and services that agents need for their consumers. And so the things like last year we bought Zoocasa. So many of you will recognize the name that it was owned by Rogers through about 2014, 2015. And they were spending upwards of $1 million a month marketing that brand across Canada.
Wow.
Eventually, they were told by regulators that they couldn't run a paper brokerage. It ended up getting sold to a small team in Toronto that then grew that to a 150-person brokerage in Toronto, but still generating leads across Canada in every market through the Korea feed. And now that they're underneath the eXp umbrella, we're actually able to start to actually expand that back out. And it's a great lead gen tool that consumers already recognize in Canada to actually get leads back in the hands of agents and connect them with an agent. And so we're excited about that. We were the first company to bring a platform called KV Core to Canada, and so that's been that's been growing. And so, again, for those that aren't familiar with KV Core, it's referred to in real estate parlance as an IDX or a website with properties that consumers can search and then be connected to an agent. And so we're really just continuing to sort of build a robust tool set, and then also looking at, what are the innovations, what are the things that we can bring in that can really make it a great consumer experience, which then, connects to agents. We've got another cool thing that we're working on right now, and I'll share it here. And probably this may be the first place it's heard in Canada, but cool. We did a partnership in the U.S. with a company called Realty.com. Some really neat guys. Lance Custon has been an agent, and then he and his business partner sold a company called HostGator. They developed a hosting platform company that they sold for hundreds of millions of dollars back a number of years ago. And for the last 7 years, they've been acquiring domains in the residential real estate space, and Lance has been actually listing and selling properties on it. So Realty.com he bought, but he also bought Realty.ca. And so Lance actually moved his personal real estate license to eXp here just a couple months ago. But embedded in that is a partnership on Realty.ca to actually launch that also across Canada to generate consumer and agent connections. Realtor.ca currently is in this sort of negotiation to potentially run it as almost a separate company generating leads for agents, but it's certainly not brokerage specific, and there's no sort of exclusivity around it. But I'm always looking at what are the different tools and ways to connect agents and consumers. And of course, the internet, for lack of a better way to describe it, is the single biggest lead gen source for people that don't know each other yet. Compared to when I got into business, 20 years ago, it was the Homes magazine, and it was the pictures of agents on bus benches. I mean, that was the lead gen strategy. It turns out there's still a lot of bus benches with realtor pics on it, but the reality is that's kind of like if you just need to throw away money to try to create brand recognition, that's what you do. But if you actually want to generate leads, you're using the internet.
It's really funny, Glenn, because my dad is a real estate agent too, and he's been in the game for a long time. He's in his early 70s now, and he's all about plastering the car with his brand and plastering a trailer and leaving that somewhere, and all of it is really it's unmeasurable. Right? So it's really hard to know if any of this is actually working. And what I loved so much about eXp when Dan and I were considering making the change coming on now 20 months ago is that it was so innovative in the way that it was going to lead the charge into the future. Right? It understood that the vast majority of people who start their home searches start it on the internet, start it on their phone at home, and they start looking at real estate, first of all, on their phone. So, we're going to be able to beat those traditional marketing strategies because we're in someone's pocket all day, right? And that was a big reason why I know that we made this shift and why we're excited to always kind of talk about what is eXp doing next, because it's exciting and I think it's innovative and something that realtors need in order to be successful in the 21st century here. So kind of, unless you want to respond to that.
Well, the other piece I want to just sort of mention is I think that one, if you're an agent, a young agent just getting started in the business, that is, and you have some technology prowess, definitely be focused on the internet lead gen side of the business. Internet marketing is the thing that can get you business. Literally within 24, 48 hours, you can actually generate some inbound leads. But when you do start to make money, and this is kind of my follow-on, you do want to start to reinforce your personal brand in your local marketplace. So there is actually a value to the bus stop bench and the sideboards and all those other things that we do see from real estate professionals. But do that as a reinvestment of your profits, not your primary driver, because it's a very expensive way to drive traffic to you as an agent.
Mm-hmm. Takes a lot of time, there's no doubt. So maybe this is kind of a good segue into talking about maybe what your vision is over the next 1 to 2 years for eXp. Because as we enter what is now a very different space than we were even just 18 months ago, all companies, including the realtors inside of them, have to become agile and work within the marketplace that we're in. Definitely keeping low fees is a big part of surviving through that particular time, but not at the expense of value. And I would love to kind of hear from you what you think eXp's value proposition. Is it going to maintain what it is currently over the next 1 to 2 years, or do you guys continue to expand into other countries? Are you guys going to be looking at new technologies and possibly the integration of things like ChatGPT and that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, we're definitely continuing to invest. I mean, I mentioned some of the things that we've been doing and continuing to do from at the brokerage level. We have a competitive cap and split model, as you know, as agents that are with eXp. I say competitive because you can always find someplace cheaper. In the absence of value, real estate brokerages compete on price. And we all know about the fact that, if you don't charge enough, then at the brokerage level, you're going to become a no-frills brokerage, which for some agents, that's actually a value prop. Like they want to go there and and there's a real estate brokerage for everyone. But I always think about the idea that, especially when you think about a model like eXp, we're a partnership model, which means that we're actually partnered with our agents. Their agents aren't there to just make the broker owner money. In fact, to some extent, you look at the way we run really thin margins as a company. You can go and look at our financials. I think we run on about 8 to 8.9% of overall revenue, and that's what we pay our bills with. And we've got over 2,000 staff members inside of that. So it's a very, very low margin business for us. But inside of that, we have our revenue share and our equity model, and we continue to sort of iterate on what are the various value props to actually create a true future retirement structure for real estate professionals. Like, that didn't exist when I got in the business. When I got in the business 20-something years ago, I mean, I was an active agent in Bellingham, Washington, which isn't too far from you guys up there in Vancouver. But I was out there listing and selling property at 35 years old, but I'd been mentored by business people, including my dad and others. And I recognized that even though I was sold on this idea that I have a real estate business, I realized very quickly that the business owned me, because the moment I quit selling was the moment that I was out of business. And that's not actually a business worth owning. And some companies say, businesses worth owning and lives worth living. Yeah, well, I can guarantee you that for 98% of real estate, well, actually, technically, 96% of realtors, because we have about 4% of realtors in the United States. So for 96% of realtors, they don't really have a business worth owning. And so our whole thing was, how do we build a model that ultimately puts the agent as true partners? We just did a press release. I don't know if you saw it on this last Friday, and I don't know when this video is going to get posted, but we just did a press release on Friday. eXp in 2022 shared $240 million of rev share and equity benefits with our agents brokers. Not U.S. dollars, but but it's a big ass number, like huge. It's actually more than every other real estate brokerage and brand that shares profit, revenue, and or equity combined. Wow. So we're talking like Keller Williams kind of created the profit share model. We've got a bunch of copycats that are sort of doing some sort of revenue share equity model. But even if you take all of those, we actually shared more with our agents and brokers. Now, if you do some further mental gymnastics, I'll just take a peek right now. But I think eXp has a market cap of approximately $1.9 billion. So that's pretty good. I'm single largest shareholder in the company. It's around about 30%. So it's a good number for me. Certainly from a net worth perspective, it's more than I'll ever spend for my lifetime, my kids' lifetime. I mean, it's probably multi-generational. But if you actually think about the $240 million and you actually apply what historically has been the S&P 500 average PE ratio for a company, which is around 15.9%. Now, right now it's around 21 is the current PE for a S&P 500 company. But if you take sort of 15, that means that our agents and brokers beneficially own, because of that 240, beneficially own an asset worth about $3.6 billion.
Wow.
You start to think about what is the power of this model. I mean, it's literally the craziest number you could think about. Like, literally, our agents and brokers beneficially, obviously it's not in actual terms, they don't have a share certificate, but they have a revenue share benefit and the equity benefits combined, $3.6 billion of distributed wealth through a unique comp model that actually creates a true retirement for real estate agents. So for me, that's what gets me juiced and excited every day. Like, it's not about, I'm reading right now, I'm sharing a book with, basically everybody I talk to. It's called Winning on Purpose by Fred Reichel. So if you get a chance, read that book. But basically what it says is that if you literally love your customer, almost like the biblical phrase of love thy neighbor as thyself. But if you love your customer, in our case our agents, as much or more than we love ourselves, then literally the feedback loop is such that you will actually create a company worth more than companies that focus on making money for shareholders. It's actually counterintuitive because in every business meeting, they always bring up the profit loss statement and the balance sheet. Like that's kind of that's the language of business, right? And at some level, it's important. But once you've got to the point where you've put, food on the table and a roof over your head, life's got to be more than about making money. It's got to be about, who is it that you serve? And so for us, it's about serving the agent. For you, it's serving in all likelihood your consumer, but also you have an agent segment to your business as well, where you're actually serving other agents because of sort of the affiliation with eXp. So that partnership model is such a powerful paradigm that is really unmatched. And I feel for these guys, by the way, and gals, but for the franchise models, if if you own a franchise, or you're a franchisor, you're stuck. Like literally, you're stuck because you can't change the model inside of your franchise to actually truly match the needs of the agents. And if you're a franchisor, you can't actually change the rules of the franchise because of franchise law to actually serve the needs of the agent in a modern economy. So you're basically hooped. And I do feel for them, by the way, because I actually, at the end of the day, I'm about the agent, no matter what brand you're with. I want the agent to win because they're the ones that at the end of the day, have been coming up through the ranks. They went and got licensed. They're trying to figure out, how to go out there and make sales. They're trying to figure out how to build a business. But fundamentally, the business model for them was flawed from the get-go because all the models were built, years and years and years ago. I mean, RE/MAX showed up in the 1980s, right? And that was sort of this innovation on agent comp, but we didn't have the internet, so it was all physical bricks and mortar based. And you go back to, Coldwell Banker, whenever they got together, in the 20s or 30s, those two guys got together. I mean, at that point, there was no MLS, and that was even, was more antiquated. And I'm sure at some point, somebody, started to go, I just built a hut. What the hell do I do with it? Can you help me sell it? And that was the origins of real estate. So,
I like that, Glenn.
That's amazing.
It's actually, you do such a great job of explaining what we've said so many times on our podcast, which is it's financial alignment and agent reciprocity. It's, if anything, the more traditional brokerages, the agents almost on paper anyhow serve, the managing broker or the brokerage house with their fees and their splits. But it feels like eXp has reversed that and recognizes that it's the agents who bring the value to the brokerage, right? And that's where, when we share in this reciprocity model or revenue share model, that's where it actually makes sense. Because if I now provide someone with extreme value in my downline, I only want that person to succeed. I no longer really compete with that person. At the end of the day, if that person goes off and does their own thing, I'm all for that because I share in their success and in their benefit. And that's the brilliance of this, in my opinion.
Right. And then we went one step further because we're all equity shareholders. Even agents that we haven't attracted into our personal rev share organizations, they're actually still business partners because as they succeed, they're part of the larger company that we're all shareholders of. So it's all, aligned compensation is probably the one. If there's an innovation that we created in the real estate industry, it was the aligned compensation model, leveraging technology, because with without the technology component that wasn't available when I got in the business in 2002. I mean, we were physically based brokerage models back then in 2002 because that's where the high-speed internet was. Nobody had, high-speed internet was dial-up, and you were lucky if you had a 56K baud modem, if you remember back in those days.
I forget those days.
Yeah, I mean, those are painful. It's like,
wait for the dial-up.
Yeah, exactly. And then and now it's just fast everywhere. It doesn't matter what you're using, whether it's your phone or your obviously your home office, or now you got Starlink. I've got I do a little boating in the San Juans and the Gulf Islands, but I've got the Starlink now, and I got high-speed internet even on the boat, so it's just crazy.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, let us also congratulate you on being able to have given back almost $250 million to the agents that love this model. That's got to feel great, and it's reminiscent of another book, if we're going to mention books, called The Go-Giver, which is doing exactly what you're doing. You're giving first, and people just naturally want to reciprocate. And again, thanks or congrats on the realty.com and .ca announcement. And of course, we appreciate you announcing it here. I'm hearing a lot about evolution and being on the cutting edge and always evolving. And that makes me very curious. Like, is eXp working with or dabbling with or about to buy companies that are working within the artificial intelligence space?
Yeah, so we are doing some internal experiments with it. Trying to figure out, where it fits in the whole thing. We've actually been promoting at some level, like Jasper AI, so you can check that out. I mean, it's a cool platform as well. I think we actually have an affiliate relationship with them to get a little bit of discount. I don't even know how to get to it, but we like the platform. If you haven't used it, it's really quite cool. You can literally have it write your property descriptions for the MLS, and it does a freaking great job. You put in some basic data, and if you're not good with the English language and sort of composing that, maybe English as a second language or what have you, there's some really cool stuff that it can do that can make your life a lot easier as a real estate professional. I wrote a LinkedIn article a while back, and it was basically about AI. It kind of scares the crap out of me because at one level it's really helpful because it does sort of algorithmically create some cool stuff from a realtor perspective. But nowadays you look at the art, the photos, the stuff that actually can design. I mean, it's going to be eventually you're not going to know if you're talking to a human being versus an AI, and then you go one step further. I mean, eventually we could be having this conversation. You might not even know that you're talking to an AI. I might have an AI version of myself. So there's some things that are that I really like about it because it's from just a composing and sort of helping just some basic blocking and tackling of real estate. It works really well. I think from a Q&A perspective, it's going to be a great tool. So your chatbots from a self-help perspective, and maybe even learning about neighborhoods and that type of thing can be really, really cool. But I think that at the end of the day, real estate agents will actually be more valued longer term because of AI and the fact that they are human beings. That was going to be my actual holistic question behind what Dan asked is what are really sort of, because when ChatGPT first came out, I spoke to so many realtors who were like, oh, our days are numbered now with artificial intelligence, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I've spoken to some really intelligent people in this space, and they're not so convinced that the human being element is just going to disappear like we think it is. And I'd love to get kind of maybe your thought process on that, because as much as we want to integrate the tools into AI, do we really feel like it's going to replace us as agents? And I think that there's a human element that takes place inside of real estate that so far can't be replicated. And I'd love to know maybe what your thoughts are on that. Yeah, so here's the way my analog is using a company in the States. I think they may actually be starting to operate in Canada as well, Redfin. So Redfin, when they showed up on the scenes around 2006, 2007, 2008-ish, they raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know how much they've raised, but they've raised a lot. And they lose a lot of money, by the way, as well. But everybody thought that they do commission rebates to buyers, and they offer, reduced listing commissions, but they disintermediate the traditional real estate professional from the relationship. So it's all this sort of self-servicey kind of thing. Hey, you get somebody will come out and show you the home. Somebody else will negotiate the contract. Somebody else will sort of do the contract to close, and they're all on salary-based things. So at one level you can go, hey, if you can figure that out, maybe there's a model there that makes some sense and whatever. But here's the thing: the agents that are on sort of we call it the salary-based, they're not hungry, and when they're not hungry and they're not sort of self-motivated, they don't actually pick up the phone. They're not proactive. They're not actually helping you at the consumer level because they're just sort of going through the motions. And the discounts were the things that Redfin was betting on that would create loyalty among consumers. Well, it turns out that consumers actually aren't motivated by commissions that much. It's an element of it, but it's actually less important than working with somebody they know, like, and trust. And so that's the real value of a real estate professional, somebody that you know, like, and trust. And you know that if you call them at 9 at night, they're there to kind of walk you through the process of where you're at emotionally in it. I mean, if you're a real estate agent, you've been in business for a while, you've probably taken calls at some pretty crazy hours with consumers because it's emotionally taxing for them, and they need an outlet. And I just don't fundamentally see that an AI is ever going to be that trusted advisor who emotionally can actually connect with you, because there's no way a machine has a human experience. Like, it just doesn't happen. And we as human beings need a human with a human experience to help us through what for a lot of people is the most significant transactions of their life. Now, does that mean that they can't get some advice from AI? Absolutely not. AI is going to be great for advice. But actually doing the real estate transaction that is emotionally taxing, you're going from making whatever an individual's making $100,000 a year, $80,000 a year, $150,000 a year, and they're buying their first home, and they've saved up for months and months and months, maybe years, for that down payment for the home. And they're going to just hand it to an AI and go, pick me a house? Not going to happen.
I don't see it. Yeah, I agree. Wow. Fascinating. Dan, I think I kind of want to talk a little bit, and Glenn, I don't know if you do too, but we've recently seen some of the copycats to eXp that are popping up now. And I think as we get into the future, and as eXp continues its success with its model, it's going to try and be replicated probably 100 different times through 100 different competitors. Why do you think eXp's, is it because you guys are first to market that you guys will likely maintain your position, or do you think it's because of the inability of competitors to really create a competitive model?
It took us 11 years before there was actually a copycat that showed up of any merit, I guess, so to speak. I mean, the number of people had sort of tried various iterations of it over the years, and this and that. What I find interesting is of the copycats, of the company. Well, I wouldn't call them copycats, but of the companies that actually do the model that we created. We're the only company that actually has somebody who actually sold real estate, ran a team, knows what it takes to actually be in the business, of actually being in the agent's shoes, et cetera. And I did it from truly a creating a model that served me when I have my agent hat on. Like, so in 2007, I said, if we ever build a company, we're going to do revenue share, not profit share. None of these other companies ever had that epiphany. They never understood fundamentally what it meant to actually build a company that was agent-centric. We were the first company to share equity with our agents' brokers. Why? Because I went into my manager at Prudential at the time and said, hey, I was the number 3 agent in the office, number 1 buyer's agent. But my first full year in the business, 2003, and I said, hey, how can I get equity? I'm here to build. I'm here to be partnered with you. And they said, we're not sharing equity. It was two guys that owned it. They owned it 50-50, and they weren't sharing equity. It's like, and if they would have, and I went to Keller after that, and the office I was in, same conversation. Said, hey, I was 30% of the office volume of the single office I was in. I went in and said, hey, I'd like to get some equity because I'm contributing, and I know because I was on the ALC at the time, the Agent Leadership Council, and understood financially the books because of the open book company. I'm like, if I'm a big reason why you guys are profitable, and I paid like $115,000 just in that one office in 1 year.
Wow.
I said, I'd like some equity. And they said, no, we're not giving equity in the office. And somebody who was a regional owner offered me a 1% interest that he owned. But then I read the franchise document. And I was like, you got to be crazy. For 1%, I got to agree to this. There was, and so I passed on it. But for me, equity ownership was something that eluded me at the agent level. And I was willing to pay for the equity, by the way, in both those scenarios. But for me, we were the first company to offer true equity in the brokerage. And all these came because I was actually in the seat, of the agent, actually as an entrepreneur, thinking about it from that perspective. Everybody else who's come after us are copycats. They don't know why we've made the decisions that we made. They just know it's working. So all they can do is copy it and hope for the best. We bought Zoocasa. We partnered with Realty.com, Realty.ca. We've got some other partnerships I haven't talked about. We've got first movers advantage, but I can have conversations to actually recognize what truly is going to add value to agents, whereas the rest of these people are sort of like, they're kind of like blind people, walking around an elephant of the elephant of real estate, and they think they know what agents want, but they actually don't because they've never sold real estate. So that's kind of my take, is that they're, hey, there's going to be a bunch of companies competing for number 2. There always will be, and right now there's 22 companies, and this came from somebody who was at KW. So according to him, at KW, they were tracking 22 different companies that were copying some version of the revenue share, profit share equity model. There's, I could go down a list, but there's, 5 of them that are getting traction. There's, one from New York, one from Florida. There's one from North Carolina. There's one coming here from France. There's, there's like a boatload of them, but not any of the ones in the top, actually one of the top 5, and they're small and they're not making any traction, but only one of those 5 actually has somebody who's actually sold real estate that's actually helping guide the company at the most senior level of the company.
Interesting. You'd think that would be a paramount foundational element about building a company, is being having that experience of boots on the ground first. And I mean, obviously, understandably, with the immense success that eXp has had, with the model that's now been proven for 15 plus years here, of course, it's going to be emulated and sought after. So it kind of makes me question, like, if we were to fast forward, 20 years into the future, do you think the whole evolution of real estate is going to go digital, or will there always be some form of a need for your sort of brick and mortar or franchise model?
Well, I don't think bricks and mortar is going away entirely. There's, if 100% of the real estate brokerage if it would all became digital platforms, then where would be the innovation? The innovation would be putting bricks and mortar in place. So you think about if in the reason why we stood out and continue to stand out is we're in a industry that's 95% is bricks and mortar based. We're part of the 5% that doesn't have bricks and mortar, and so that's to some extent our innovative lever. It's our enabling technology for everything else is to reduce the cost of running the brokerage, so we can actually put a bunch of innovations in on the agent's behalf. But eventually, and you look at even Amazon, using them as an example, they're an online marketplace, but they're actually now starting to put into malls and different places in America physical Amazon spaces. So I think there's always going to be some element of bricks and mortar. We have a lot of top agent that run eXp Realty branch offices where they actually spend the money on supporting their own branch office, because for them, the branch office actually makes sense. But it's not a requirement. It's more for them. It's a nice to have, but maybe they're in a resort community and they've got lots of foot traffic and they've got a great location. Maybe they own the building. They've invested in commercial real estate, whatever. There's a number of reasons why there will always be a bricks and mortar component for some percentage of the industry. We're not going 100% digital, just like Amazon's not going to put out of business the local retail outlets. There's always going to be a need to run out and grab something from the store. Like Whole Foods is not going away, even though Amazon owns them. It's not going to be like a warehouse where they just deliver goods to your house. But I still use Amazon like 3 times a week, but I go to the store. So I think there's always going to be a need for some real estate from an agent perspective, and even for some consumers. Some consumers are going to prefer the physically based brokerage model, and that's the great thing about real estate. There's a whole bunch of different models that can coexist. We've got, Canada's got well over 100,000 agents, I think, in Canada. In the U.S., we've got over 1.5 million real estate professionals, and you need to always be innovating and differentiating in order to stand out among the competition.
That's pretty awesome. That kind of covers everything we wanted to talk about today, and really encapsulates, I think, the value proposition that is eXp, and going forward, whether you're a consumer, whether you're an agent, there's a lot of reasons to like eXp. So Glenn, really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully this won't be the last time. We'd love to have you again and carry on the conversation about the trajectory for eXp and how it will continue to be the most agent-centric model, I think, and we think, that exists today. So thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Ryan. And of course, if I have anything to do with it, we will be the most agent-centric model in real estate. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Awesome.